The more I watch of Jobless Reincarnation, the more I enjoy Jobless Reincarnation. Last week I thought was without a doubt the best episode, and this episode pretty much mirrors episode 3 without much struggle. I mean, as much as I'd love to say I was shocked by, Paul ending up cheating on his wife, people, the commenters, they think they're a lot more clever than they are, will leave very ambiguous that are completely spoiler comments like, oh, just you wait, I doubt you'll say that about Paul next week. And then you see the title of the episode called Emergency Family Meeting. I mean, it's pretty clear what's going to happen. But even with that said, I mean, since they reveal it so early in the episode, it didn't distract too much. And it really did provide for some subject matter that you just don't get to see. And you really don't get to see it in an Isekai series. Because generally when you're reincarnated in a fantasy world, you're in a world like this where it's very magical. There's a lot of fantasy. There's kings and queens. And the idea of poly relationships are pretty common, especially in these time periods, so if it does happen, people brush it aside. But I like the idea that the wife, and Rudy's mother in this case, was actually really pissed off, because that wasn't the type of relationship that they built up. It was one-on-one, and the husband cheated. The husband committed what is considered to be the ultimate taboo in most relationships. And while the maid herself can start blaming herself, she does so in the episode, at the end of the day, it is the father who put himself on the maid and ended up with a situation where Rudy has 2 siblings, and it's a pretty awkward situation introducing your friends and your family to this is my maid and this is my husband's other child and things like that. But I thought they did a great job at not only kind of getting a realistic sense of drama down from the mother's just anger and just distress of not knowing what to do or what to feel, but also, once again, highlighting the difference in Rudy's intellect to that of others, because he has the ability, because he's still young in physical form, that he can still act like a child and manipulate the situation to keep the family together, all things considered. And the idea of him actually kind of like going up saying like, hey, I heard this and that, it was actually father's doing, there's no way that she would be able to say no, despite her saying like, I'm leaving my door open after hearing you guys have sex for so long, I just couldn't take it anymore. She is blaming herself even though he was the one who put himself on her, and the idea that he was able to warp the situation so the mother would not, either kick out the father, kick out the maid, because the maid would have ended up dead. She had nowhere to go. The idea of like, you do this beautiful directing choice of having the opening play in a horrible winter storm as everything is dim and quiet as everyone's looking in distraught. It is such a clever directing choice to really put into perspective that if she leaves this place, she will die, and does this sin, does this mistake warrant her death? Most people would say no. You don't have to love her, you don't have to hate her, but there's no way she deserves that. Make matters worse, like it seems like it was her first time too. There's a lot of things that happen, and while this is a show that definitely doesn't shy away from the idea that even in this episode, like, our boy Rudy says, like, I don't really, think he's a great guy, I think he's scum, but I also think I'm scum. My mentality is very scummy, but I kind of respect him, and I think it does go hand in hand with families, because even when a family member does something bad, you can't help but still love them unless it crosses a certain line, and clearly for someone like Rudy, it hasn't crossed that line yet, or for the wife herself, because she decided to, give him one last shot. And the idea of having this type of concept and this type of story where you have 2 characters where there's a lot of good aspects that you can currently look at with Rudy or Paul, and see what they're doing. In the case of, say, Rudy, he's going to get a job so he can pay for Sylphie's tuition so that she can come to a magic academy alongside him. And he does whatever he can in order to do so, which, I mean, based on the episode, it looks like his job's going to be taking him probably multiple weeks before coming back. He's doing a really good thing, but he also has no problem saying and thinking scummy thoughts or manipulating situations to make his father look worse than he actually was, and not sharing the blame, or in the fact that he probably will have more than one wife, all things considered. This does not seem like a man who wants one-on-one, but then again, on the flip side, if he built his relationships up to be more open than clearly the father did, he won't be as scummy as his father was. So the idea of, you can look at certain actions, like the fact that he uses his young age in order to steal panties, right? But then you look at, say, Paul, there's a lot of great things about Paul's character, but he also is a cheater, right? He was the one who decided to act. So there's all these things where you look, you're saying, these are bad aspects, but there's also good aspects. So putting them in their perspectives and putting yourself in their shoes, you see things from a family's perspective rather than just an outsider saying, oh, I wouldn't stay with a man like that, or I wouldn't, deal with that. It's so interesting how this show despite having so many things that we now see as cliches, you can really understand why certain things were referenced so heavily by different authors, because you can see it works so well in Jobless Reincarnation's case, where you just understand and you can see where all these other series went wrong, because really, there was no excusing anything. It was the way this all kind of worked out was a kid lied. A kid lied, and that's how it kept the family together. But in doing so, can you say, was that the wrong choice or not? Because not only will this maid and her baby be able to survive, Rudy will have someone who's going to now be devoted, which, I mean, if I've seen enough anime, I have a suspicion that we're going to get an incest storyline sooner rather than later, but then again, only time will tell. But still, you can look at so many things and say, there's a lot of scummy things here, but the idea, from what I've heard and from what I've seen so far, this is definitely a story about redemption, and I'm really excited to see more and where they take it. And I really like that about this show, is details that generally you don't put on the protagonist side. You put those on the antagonist side, because you're already ready to hate those characters. They stole the princess, they're a horrible whoremonger, they do this and that, they're horrible, but you're perfect prince. He has all the ladies latch on to him, but he doesn't touch any other ones but the one that he loves. In this show, the father cheats. The father's a scumbag in that regard, and the father has to learn and grow from that, despite having some pretty questionable remarks even after the fact. I like the fact that this show isn't hiding away from those dirty details, and is saying, like, not everything's good and great and righteous. It can be pretty black and white, and relationships, especially those in families, can be pretty rocky. And if you have a live-in maid that's kind of around your husband day in and day night, if he's not a great person who's fully devoted to you, bad things might happen. And I think it's so interesting to have a fantasy show like this that really has no right to be this good on paper, really just shake the foundation, and you're really happy that this studio has been formed specifically to adapt Jobless Reincarnation. It's just so great to see not only the quality remain consistent, but just seeing how, like I mentioned, the opening and the way they use that in this episode to actually amplify the story. There's so many little things always happening in this show that just continues to blow me away and adds so many little details that you can take hours upon hours and rewatches upon rewatches and find something different to appreciate every single week with this episode. Or any episode in that case. And I love that about this show. I mean, everyone was hyping this up as I'd come up here like ripping into Paul saying he's the worst character ever. I think cheating is one of the worst things you can do. But at the same time, I'm not the one in the relationship with Paul. If I was in the relationship with Paul, sure, I wouldn't be in the relationship with Paul. I mean, I'm here watching a story, and it was really interesting seeing how they were able to do a cheating concept, especially in a fantasy show, which, I mean, sure, if we're in a romance show, but the fact that it's so much more than just simple, like, relationships, it's so interesting to see how they really stuck the landing and made it feel pretty dark, pretty dirty, and just honestly unpleasant, and they made it work quite well while still sprinkling in some funny comedy off and on, because I mean, despite the kid being a kid, he still has the mind of a 40-year-old scumbag, and he admits as such in this episode. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts and feelings, and definitely those series after kind of getting knocked out and thrown into a cart with probably one of his fantasies and where that could go in the future. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.